Dude, seriously, it's Captain America. And I'm shaking your hand too long. It's the Dude Seriously Show. Hey guys, welcome to the Dude Seriously Show. Well, we're on the road to Infinity War and we're almost there. Tonight we're talking Captain America Civil War. I'm Jonathan.
I'm Tim.
I'm Jared.
Charles Conklin.
And we're talking Civil War. What'd you think of Civil War?
It's actually in the top 5 of my Marvel movies. I'm just totally impressed how they could bring all these characters together and not make it just over cumbersome.
Civil War is definitely number 1 for me. It was such a fun experience in the theater. It's the most fun I think I've ever had at a comic book movie in the theater until April 27th when we get Infinity War. I'm pretty sure that'll be it. But there were just so many magical moments in this movie that really showed how this universe has come together and how much we care about it. And yeah, it's my number 1.
It's way up there for me as well. It touches on a lot of topics that I feel apply to real world situations. They do a great job at it, and everybody gets their moment to shine. They don't really skimp on any character development, and you get a lot of new characters introduced. It's a great movie.
Yeah, Team Stark all the way.
The Russo Brothers directed this. They came back from Captain America: The Winter Soldier. And this is really an ensemble film, the biggest ensemble in the MCU to date. They handled it masterfully. So it gives me a lot of hope for Infinity War, what they'll do when they have the entire universe at their disposal.
And what continues to surprise me is the fact that the Russo brothers, before they got introduced into the Marvel universe and started with Winter Soldier, is that they were best known for a little TV show called Community, which, like you just said, Civil War is an ensemble movie. Community was an ensemble TV show, so maybe they actually, had a good indoctrination into how to write and how to direct a big cast like that.
It was really impressive too this is Captain America's story. He's in the title, Captain America, the Civil War. So it's kind of like an Avengers movie at the same time. So it's really crazy. They did a really excellent job of balancing that.
There was a joke that this was called Avengers 2.5. I don't think that's a joke at all. I think it's just totally cool. Other than Thor and Hulk, everybody else is here, and they handled everything so well.
Well, and if you go back to the comics, you can't tell an Avengers story without Captain America. So it goes both ways there.
Well, and like we talked about this being Civil War, there's a storyline in the comic books of Civil War, but it encompassed the entire Marvel universe and fractured off into little subplots all through it.
Right.
They had to use what they had, and they only had maybe 12, a dozen, or a little bit more characters. You couldn't have more than that in a movie like this without it just getting unwieldy and just not everybody getting their time.
Right.
This is good. I feel like there's not really a lot of divide right now.
No,
So
not at
we'll
all.
see how it progresses.
The divide's coming.
Not at all. Oh, by the way, I've got these accords here. Just needed you guys to sign these.
We didn't need to bring that up.
My pen is going to be over here.
Yeah, all right.
Well, you got to keep them as a set, man.
I'm not signing.
Okay, fine. Whatever.
I just can't do that.
That's cool.
So one of the really neat things in this early on is we see a de-aged Robert Downey Jr. They used CGI to make him look like a teenager for that barf scene, and it was really neat. I mean, they just did that so masterfully.
I remember it stunning me because I watched movies with Robert Downey Jr. when I was a kid, and it took me by surprise. Wait, am I still watching the same movie? Yeah. I mean, where did this? I knew they had the tech where they've done all this kind of stuff before, but golly, it's flawless.
I think the thing too is we have a frame of reference for what Robert Downey Jr. looked like at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, I'm sure that kind of helped the CGI team too.
Sure.
That they had a frame of reference.
Yeah.
But the big thing is like, if it didn't look good, we could go back to any of his movies from the 80s and say, oh, you needed to look like this, and it looks flawless.
At least they weren't trying to get rid of a mustache.
Yeah.
They did it in Guardians of the Galaxy as well.
They got rid of a mustache?
No. Yeah.
We might as well stop there.
So the opening of this movie takes place in Lagos, and we see the Avengers. Some of them are out on the streets, and while we saw the Avengers doing their thing at the beginning of Age of Ultron, I like this one a little bit better just because it's more grounded. It feels like a mapped out mission instead of just flying through and beating up goons and things. Seeing them kind of train Wanda along the way,
There's
too.
some tactics to it.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And
Yeah.
it brings us to Crossbones.
But speaking of Lagos, what is up with those big title graphics? I mean, those just drive me nuts. Every time I see it, it's like Lagos or 1991. And just,
Well,
I had to,
Don't
had to
forget where
ask
it's
that.
at, though. At that
Yeah.
point.
I guess not. Yeah. I think it's supposed to add tension, but it just every time it's just really.
Yeah, it's
Look,
definitely in
let's-
your face.
yeah.
It's like sending an email in all caps.
Why are you yelling?
I understood that reference. Anyway, Crossbones is a bad villain in the comics. I mean, when I say bad villain, he is intense.
He's BA.
Yeah, he is BA certified. And I was so looking forward to his character because he looked so good and he was menacing looking too. And they take him out so quickly.
The look in the film looked very apocalyptic. And,
Yeah.
And was not expecting him to go out. I having read the Civil War comic, I was waiting for him to show up at the end with a sniper rifle, but
Yeah, I mean, he's a reoccurring character. He's still alive and still operating. So it was kind of a shame that they killed him off so quickly. Especially, you know, with his little bit of a storyline from Winter Soldier, you kind of could feel for him a little bit.
right.
I mean, Civil War is my #1 movie, so there's nothing that could really make it much better for me. But I wonder if they would have made Crossbones work in cahoots with Zemo. In a way
Yeah,
that could have
cool.
tightened the story a little bit.
Yeah.
Henchman.
Yeah.
I actually thought that would be the case. That I thought they would have some kind of team up going, but
Because
obviously
even
not.
in all of the marketing for this movie, like Zemo was never really in the picture, so it was kind of a surprise going into the theater. Like, this isn't how I thought the movie was going to go.
little misdirection.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
movie does that several times.
Yep.
Very
Where
much so.
I liked how, and this is just a personal opinion of mine, what they did in Avengers 2 with Black Widow, kind of dampening down her character and not making her seem as strong because of her dependency on Bruce Banner and the relationship she wanted to have. I thought this was a wonderful way in the introduction of the movie to establish her as a powerhouse again.
yeah.
And
Oh,
she
her-
was another BA.
Her fight
what she
scene
did.
in Lagos is
She
probably one of
just
the
handled
best.
it.
Oh
It
my
was
Yeah,
God.
wonderful.
yeah, especially like taking everybody out as soon as she
Yeah.
comes in with
Yeah.
that motorcycle. Oh yeah,
And,
she's
and,
awesome.
and the way she jumps and grabs this guy with her legs and then punches this other guy and then moves on to him. Like, it's crazy.
But
Eileen-
she's still not gonna pet Red Wing. Yeah, I'm not thinking that.
Yeah.
Bad.
I felt like that was their apology for doing what they did and immediately saying, okay, we realize we kind of
That's a really good point. That's a
Yeah.
really good
Yeah.
point because
Yeah.
you know, from Avengers to Age of Ultron, it seems like it was a little bit of an apology letter to Hawkeye.
Yeah.
I think you might be right that this is a little bit of an apology from Age of Ultron to this movie. That like, yeah, we may have done Widow a little wrong.
I was super happy when I was in the theater, and I just kind of I don't remember who was with me, but I leaned over to him and I was like, well, that was them saying sorry because
Widow's
it was
back.
immediately like you're like rooting for her.
Yep. Yep.
So following Ross coming in and laying out the Accords for how they're going to be, we get this really great scene of all of the Avengers sitting around and talking about the Accords and what this means, and we get some banter about them following on each side. And, you know, it makes perfect sense. We know why Vision's on his side. We know why Falcon's on this side. And, you know, each person kind of gets to make, even if it's just a line or two, gets to make their point for why they're on the side that they do. Like, even Falcon calls out Black Widow and says, aren't you the woman that told the government to kiss her ass a few years ago? Again, I think that that's really important that when you see them later on fighting at the airport, it's not like, oh, they're just on this side because of Cap and Iron Man and that's who they stand with. No, they're standing for what they believe with the issues that are set.
And I think it is important to explain Widow's choice because I would have thought she would have gone with Team Cap rather than Team Stark because, you know, Winter Soldier, she's really close to Cap. And you know, that leads to the really tender scene they have at the church following Peggy's funeral.
But at the same time, I feel like Black Widow is definitely a character who has seen a lot in the past and realizes the consequences of what she's done.
Yeah.
So as close as she could be to Cap, she understands that you've got to pay and you've got to deal with the aftermath of situations.
I think she says at one point, you know, if we can keep one hand on the wheel, we can at least steer
Yes.
where we're going. But she also says,
Staying together is more important than how we stay together.
I think for her, this is a family, and she wants them to stay together.
Yeah.
Their relationship that was really, really kind of firmed up in Winter Soldier, you can see throughout this movie, she's really looking out for Cap.
Yeah.
So Peggy passes away in this film, off camera, of course, but Cap goes to her funeral and Sharon Carter gets up and says some words.
Well, and you know, I don't think up until that point, Cap realized that Agent Carter was related to Peggy Carter, so he's taken by surprise. But what really got me was there's this speech that Cap gives Spider-Man in the books, and it's a pretty epic speech. And the first time I saw this movie, when she's kind of giving the eulogy for Peggy, she basically cribs that speech. They attribute it to Peggy, which is kind of a cool, positive thing, but in my mind, the first time I saw it, I was like, that's Cap's speech. He's supposed to say that. But I think we've all talked about how it's essentially Peggy's voice or beliefs rattling around in his head as far as the MCU goes, which does make it a little more tolerable.
And the timing of it too is what's so great, because at the funeral, Cap's at this turning point where maybe he could sign the Accords, maybe he'd be willing to jump over, and as he's thinking about, well, where should I fall on this, he hears, one last sentiment from Peggy, and it's, you've got to stand firm and say no. And tell
Even
them
if
to
everyone is telling you what's right is wrong, that whole thing.
You don't know the rest.
I've got it written down, but I don't want
Plant
to read it.
yourself
I don't
like a
wanna show
tree
you. By the river of truth.
and say, no, you move.
When they tell you to move, yeah.
He re-echoes
You'll
that
edit
at the
that,
end of
right?
the movie.
You'll edit that.
No, that
You'll
stays
cut that in there.
That stays in.
Sure. So Civil War is the first time that we see T'Challa himself, the Black Panther, and man, is he awesome. He's so great.
I really like Black Panther.
So you like cats?
Well, sure.
Well, man shows up in a cat suit and you don't have questions?
I mean, receipt for a bird suit.
Oh, come on, man. Bird costume.
So Black Panther was really awesome.
You know what? Actually, in this, from what I knew about Black Panther before I saw this movie, I thought they did really well. He was very menacing, very intimidating. His suit was incredible. How he could just stand there while helicopters firing at him and it didn't really even faze him. And how he could stand toe to toe with both Cap and both Bucky. It's just, I mean, he was a cool character. And then you see him later in his own movie, and I think they took him back a bit, in my opinion, because his costume just was practical. There was no need for the nanotech. It worked. It looked legitimately like you would expect to in a real world situation. He was just a cool character. I think Chadwick Boseman is perfect.
Oh, yeah, and I love
World-class actor.
that personal interaction. When you first meet the prince and his dad, it's very personal.
Oh, yeah.
and
You can tell there's a lot of love there.
oh yeah.
It's definitely.
You can really feel the love tonight.
God.
I didn't say it. That's Elton John. I know it's Elton John. It's not Phil Coulson or Coulson.
Easy for you to say.
I can't talk. I had the flu. It left its mark on me.
I knew you should have stretched.
Oh, good gracious.
Phil Coulson
Yeah.
is S.H.I.E.L.D.
Right.
Phil
Collins is not Can You Feel the Love Tonight, because that's Elton John.
No, it's Everett Ross. Never mind.
Thunderbolt
Bad
Ross.
joke. Oh, Everett.
Everett,
The
the
new
Hobbit.
Phil Coulson.
Well, we're mixing everything together, so why don't we do
Yeah.
If anybody out there is confused, you're not alone.
I don't know what just happened either.
Yeah.
We're totally confused.
To the airport scene. We could do an episode alone on how awesome the
I
airport scene
agree.
was.
I agree.
But some of the highlights, are Spider-Man and Ant-Man. They just steal the show.
Yeah, especially with the Empire Strikes Back reference, and
Yes.
yeah, you can't beat that.
Well, and just Ant-Man. Paul Rudd is just such a good comedian. Well, good actor, but he's a really good comedian. I mean, he can just play straight face and still just crack you up.
Every line he has in Civil War is quotable, and that's so true. Everything he says is like, oh, Captain America. As soon as you see him, everything is memorable that he does. And he has 4 minutes of screen time total, if that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
You don't really like Ant-Man that much, do you?
No, if you watched last week's review, I freaking love Ant-Man. Oh my god, he's my favorite character in the MCU. He is awesome in this movie. And then the Giant Man scene. I remember being in the theater, opening night in the theater when that happens, and he grows and he's holding War Machine. Oh, everybody in the theater's going nuts, excited. And that was one of those magic Marvel moments for me that I think that will always stick out, right up there with the circle shot from the first Avengers for me.
Yeah.
It's just
It's
one
iconic.
of those scenes that is just iconic and memorable, and it was so fun. Everybody's like, what's going on here? Even in the audience, too.
Yeah, well, you can see it on Bucky and Cap's face. They're like, what is he even talking about? But also, if you think about it, he'd already kind of made a little bit of a fool of himself, both with Widow when she shocks him and shoots him across and he hits the side of that truck, and then when he gives the truck to Cap to throw and he thinks it's a water truck, but it turns out to be a fuel truck. So you're like, okay, this guy doesn't really quite have it all together, and then he does that.
Well, and you think about it too. I mean, he really might not have it all together here because in the Ant-Man movie, Hank Pym shows his disgust for all things Stark, and here goes Ant-Man leaving behind his family, right? That in the Ant-Man film, all he wants to do is be with his daughter and try to have a normal life and everything. And now, not only is he breaking the Accords, but he's putting the suit within arm's reach of a Stark. And he ends up getting taken in. So who knows what happens to the suit? We don't know.
I didn't even think about that.
In Ant-Man and the Wasp, I'm sure Hank Pym is going to have some harsh words like, Scott, are you kidding me? You took the suit straight to Stark, you know? Who knows what we'll see?
There's definitely going to be some repercussions, and that's going to be fun to see.
It's almost like he didn't think about the actions he was doing, and then he has to deal with consequences after.
Yeah.
There's so many layers. It's like an onion.
Parfait.
Yeah, it could be like a parfait. Who doesn't like a parfait?
There's our obscure references.
It's Shrek, man. Who doesn't know Shrek? We got it.
Yeah.
Leave
it to the old guys.
I grew up with Shrek. I love Shrek.
You just don't remember it.
I just don't remember that part.
I'm Team Jonathan on that one. Sorry.
Yeah. I remember the waffles part. I remember the...
In the morning, I'm making waffles.
See, that's a little more iconic.
Well, we're already swapping manly stories. So
So earlier we talked about those title references that come up that tell you where the next scene is about to take place. And personally, I feel like those scenes were just building up to the big one. Queens, there we go, Spider-Man.
that song cuts in.
Yeah, and I'd never heard that song beforehand, but like now when I hear it, it's like, oh, I think of those
I'm in
big
Queens
letters. Yeah. So it brings us to Peter Parker with Aunt May, Tony Stark's there. It's this great scene, and I feel like that scene, not only does it really set up their relationship in Homecoming, but it shows Tony Stark's banter, maybe the best of any part in this movie, kind of his quippiness. And then we see Peter Parker. He's kind of quipping right back at him, and he's holding up with him. And we get a lot of great explanation for who he is as a character without diving into the origin story yet again.
That scene was very powerful. It was very heavy in its own way, and like you said, it tells the entire origin story without going into words. And you also feel the weight of with great power comes great responsibility without actually saying those words. It's such a great scene, and it's one of the highlights of the movie in my book.
To be fair, though, I wish that they would have said the great power line, and then in Spider-Man Homecoming, they just kind of gloss over Uncle Ben. And I wish that it was more of an element in this universe. Totally. But I agree that in the context and the scope of Civil War, they handle it really well.
Yeah, they didn't really have time to get into all that, and because it wasn't Spidey's story, it was just his entry.
This is just one of the most brutal things I feel like I've seen in the MCU. You know, Falcon comes in, who was the intended target of Vision. He comes in, he's like, man, almost like apologetic, even though it's not really his fault. And Tony just blasts the crap out of him. It almost looked like he should have died.
It looked like he did.
Yeah. You know what I love about that, though, is that Falcon is apologizing, yes, because of him being involved. But if you remember from Winter Soldier, Falcon lost a wingman.
Yep.
So he's reliving that. He knows what Tony feels like to watch one of his friends be dead stick in the air with no control.
And that's one of the rare cases I think you see Tony in the whole MCU. He is pissed and he is upset. And he takes it out like that.
And do you blame him at all? No, you don't.
I kind of do, because if he was not going after him, if he was Cap tried to explain, look, this is what's going on. If he would have listened to him, even if they're disagreeing on the Accords, he's trying to explain that there's an army of these Winter Soldier type guys. We gotta stop them.
I do feel like if there is anybody that is human, though, it's Tony, and he's gonna play into those emotions. No,
I don't know about that. I think there's plenty of them that are human.
Well, no, in the regards of
no, I mean as far as having emotions, I think Sam is probably the biggest-hearted person in the whole series.
I mean human in the sense of he's privy to his faults.
I agree. I still say Sam.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that Tony, his biggest character flaw is that he never is able to listen. He's self-centered, and he's never able to take anything from anybody else. And had he just listened to Cap, Had he just talked to the team about Ultron? Had he just, there's so many points in the MCU with Iron Man's character that if he would have just taken a second to hear anybody else's opinion, they could have avoided crisis.
However, honestly, Tony's emotions are getting the best of him, and that's why he's not listening, because he's dealing with the breakup with Pepper. He's dealing with the lady that cornered him at the elevator, and the death of the kid that they caused in Sokovia.
The fact that he caused that incident
right.
with Ultron.
And yeah, exactly. I mean, there's so much that Tony's dealing with that he's like, no, this is what we have to do.
That's exactly when you should listen, though.
You're right.
Because you're not in your best mindset. When you've got all that stuff going on, you should listen to the people that are really trying to look out for you.
I agree, but that's why he's not listening, though, because he's so narrow-minded on what he thinks the goal should be.
I still think it kind of goes back to what Johnny said,
Civil War.
which is that he's always very self-centered. He's a very self-centered character. He is known for that, and he does always think he has the best answers to any problem, and he's not necessarily going to agree with everybody else. It goes all the way back.
You can't fault him for trying, though.
Yeah.
I mean, like, it's ego aside.
What, are you giving him an A for effort?
No, hell no. I mean, like, he's got plenty of things he's got to work on, but you can't deny Ultron was supposed to be something positive. This is how I perceive him. Deep down, he's trying to do the right thing, but he does let his ego get in the way. But you can't neglect the fact that he is trying to do the right thing.
But he also can't force his mindset onto the other
no,
people.
And that's where it's. But
said,
Cap does that too.
It's said in Ultron, we're supposed to be a team. We're supposed to do this stuff together. It's not supposed to be what you want. It's supposed to be what we want.
So I think we could talk all night, but with that, we're going to bring Captain America: Civil War to a close. This is my #1 Marvel movie. I absolutely love it, and Infinity War, I think, could maybe top it based on what I've seen, but right now Civil War is and likely will for a long time remain to be my #1.
Pretty much what you said. This is a perfect closeout for the Cap trilogy. In my opinion, they just get better and better in each episode or series or whatever. Yeah, it's right at the top of the list continually for me.
I can't say this is #1, but it's definitely a top 5.
I feel like for me, it's definitely way up there. It's in top 5 as well. They introduce a lot of new characters. Everybody gets ample screen time and amazing roles for what they play. It's very, very well done.
So that brings us to a close on Captain America: Civil War. We really hold this one in high regard, and dude, seriously, it's definitely worth checking out. Thanks for checking out this week's episode of Road to Infinity War. We'll be back next week with another episode for you, and dude, seriously, we'll see you on the next one.
Try not to move as much, sorry.
I believe this is yours, Ant-Man.
Oh no!
Oh!